Major League Baseball has never seen anything quite like what happened tonight. Not in recent memory. Not in the way that this unfolded, publicly, violently, and with a deliberateness that left every single person inside that stadium struggling to process what their eyes had just witnessed. Because what the Mets did to Shohei Ohtani tonight was not a mistake. It was not an accident born from the heat of competition. It was not the kind of regrettable collision that happens when two elite athletes are moving at full speed in a high-pressure moment and cannot avoid each other. It was vicious. It was calculated. And now, one Mets player is facing the kind of suspension that does not end after a week or a month. According to multiple inside sources with direct knowledge of the league's internal discussions, what MLB is preparing to hand down is a penalty that could erase the remainder of this player's season entirely, a consequence so severe that it has no recent parallel in the disciplinary history of this sport. Otani has revealed the truth. The umpire has severely penalized the Mets catcher and pitcher. And Bichette has done something in protest that has made an already devastating night for this franchise completely unrecoverable. The baseball world was not prepared for any of this. And what Otani revealed in the aftermath has made everything even more serious than it first appeared. To understand the full picture of what happened tonight, you have to go back further than the moment the play occurred. According to multiple inside sources with direct knowledge of the situation, the dangerous conduct directed at Otani did not emerge spontaneously from the competitive pressure of a single game. The pattern that the umpire's review ultimately confirmed had been building across a series of recent matchups in ways that multiple people inside the Dodgers organization had already begun to document and discuss with increasing urgency. According to those sources, the Dodgers coaching staff had raised concerns internally about the physical approach being taken against Otani specifically, concerns that went beyond the standard tactical adjustments that opposing teams make against elite players. What was being flagged inside the Dodgers organization was something different. Something that existed in the deliberate, repeated physical targeting of one player in a manner that those with experience in the game recognized as intentional even when it was constructed to appear otherwise. According to multiple eyewitnesses on the field, the dangerous play tonight was the moment that pattern crossed from something that could still be debated into something that could not. What the Mets catcher and pitcher did to Otani in that moment was visible from every angle, captured by every camera, and witnessed by enough people on the field that the umpiring crew had everything they needed to act with the full force of their authority before the play had even fully concluded. The umpire called for the review without a moment of hesitation. According to multiple sources present at the stadium, the speed of that decision communicated everything to everyone on the field immediately. This was not a standard review. This was not the routine examination of a borderline call that could reasonably go either way depending on the angle you were looking at it from. The crew chief's decision to go to the monitor carried a gravity that players on both sides recognized before a single frame of footage had been examined. What the monitor revealed, according to multiple sources familiar with the review process, was unambiguous in every meaningful sense. The dangerous play on Otani was not the product of athletic collision or competitive instinct operating within acceptable limits. The positioning, the timing, and the execution of what both the catcher and the pitcher did in the sequence leading up to the incident told a story that had only one honest interpretation. And the crew chief, according to those sources, reached that interpretation quickly, because the footage did not require extended analysis to understand. The penalties were severe, immediate, and delivered to a Mets dugout that had been watching the review with the tense, cornered energy of people who already knew what the monitor was showing and understood that the verdict coming toward them was going to be impossible to dispute no matter how loudly or how forcefully they tried. Bichette tried anyway. And what he did in the process has become the defining image of an already catastrophic night for the New York Mets. According to multiple inside sources with direct knowledge of the sequence of events following the umpire's ruling, Bichette's initial protest was loud and immediate, the kind of visceral, emotional response that players sometimes produce when they believe, or need to appear to believe, that their teammate has been treated unjustly. He moved toward the umpiring crew with an energy that alarmed people on both sides of the field before he had covered half the distance between himself and the crew chief. The argument escalated through multiple stages. According to multiple eyewitnesses, the umpires issued clear and explicit warnings at each stage, warnings that Bichette acknowledged with his body language and then disregarded with his continued conduct. This was not a player who was unaware that he was pushing past boundaries. This was a player who understood exactly where those boundaries were and chose to push past them regardless. And then, in a moment that those present described as one of the most shocking things they had ever witnessed on a professional baseball field, Bichette directed his protest not at the umpiring crew but at Otani himself. According to multiple sources, what Bichette said in those seconds, and the physical expression of his protest that accompanied those words, crossed a line so fundamental that the umpiring crew's response was instantaneous and absolute. The ejection came with a speed and a finality that required no discussion. According to those present, the crew chief's delivery of the ejection was accompanied by language that reflected the full seriousness of what he had just witnessed, language that players standing nearby described as the strongest they had ever heard an umpire use in a formal on-field ruling during a regular season game. According to multiple sources, the league was notified of Bichette's conduct before he had reached the dugout tunnel. And the framing of that notification, according to those familiar with the internal communication, made clear that what Bichette had done was being treated as a serious independent act of misconduct, one whose consequences would be determined with the same severity being applied to the catcher and pitcher whose dangerous play had set the entire sequence of events in motion. The Mets player now facing a potential season-ending suspension is at the center of an internal crisis inside the organization that goes far beyond the disciplinary process itself. According to multiple sources with knowledge of the situation within the Mets clubhouse, the reaction to the possibility of a suspension of this magnitude has divided the team in ways that the organization was completely unprepared to manage. According to those sources, there are players within that clubhouse who believe the conduct that triggered this outcome was indefensible, that what was done to Otani tonight, and the manner in which it was done, placed the entire organization in a position that no competitive goal could justify. These players, according to multiple sources, have not been quiet about that belief in the private conversations happening inside the Mets facilities in the hours since the game concluded. And then there are those who have rallied around the player facing suspension, not necessarily defending the conduct itself but defending the person, expressing loyalty to a teammate in crisis in the way that professional athletes sometimes do when the institutional consequences bearing down on someone they care about feel disproportionate regardless of the underlying facts. That division, according to multiple sources, has created an atmosphere inside the Mets clubhouse that several veterans have described as the most uncomfortable they have experienced all season. The laughter is gone. The music is off. Players are sitting at their lockers in the kind of silence that only descends when a group of people realizes simultaneously that something has happened that cannot be undone, managed, or explained away. Otani revealed the truth after the game. Not in the careful, measured language of a player protecting himself from controversy. Not through a representative whose job is to minimize exposure and control narrative. He stood in front of the assembled media and he spoke with a clarity and a directness that those who cover him regularly described as the most unguarded they had ever seen him. He confirmed that the dangerous play tonight was not the first incident. He confirmed that the pattern had been visible to him and to people around him for longer than tonight's game. He confirmed that what was done to him was deliberate, that the evidence the umpire's monitor revealed was consistent with everything he had personally observed and experienced across the recent history between these two teams. And then he said something that silenced every reporter in that room completely. He said that revealing the truth tonight was not about the penalties. It was not about the suspensions or the reviews or the institutional response that was already being prepared by the league. It was about making clear that what had been happening would not continue to happen in silence. That the willingness to stay quiet in the face of deliberate, repeated misconduct had limits. And that those limits had been reached. For a player who has spent his entire career allowing his performance to speak for him, those words carried a weight that nothing that happened on the field tonight could match. Because Otani was not angry. He was not emotional. He was simply, carefully, and completely honest. And in professional baseball, there is almost nothing more powerful than that. The Mets are facing consequences tonight that will reshape this franchise for the remainder of this season and beyond. A season suspension looms over a player whose conduct the league has documented completely. The catcher and pitcher who started it all are facing penalties of their own. Bichette's protest has added another layer of institutional consequence to an organization already drowning in them. And Otani has revealed a truth that the entire baseball world needed to hear. The baseball world is watching. And after tonight, the New York Mets will be defined not by what they accomplished on the field, but by what they chose to do to the greatest player in the sport.